Yeah, I think interviewing is a skill unto itself. You know, it's something that some people do find quite comfortable and are quite confident with, and some people, you know, really do struggle with it. I think the main advice I can give someone if they are in the latter camp is to really remember that an interview is a two-way street. You know, I think a lot is said about how candidates can interview better, but I think it's really important to remember that not all managers are used to interviewing, or not all managers are as good at interviewing as they maybe want to be. So I think if you remember that you're dealing with a human and you're interviewing someone, to spend a hell of a lot of time with them, right? You know, yes, you are there to answer questions and prove suitability for your job, but equally you've got to be, you know, aware of the fact that you're going to be spending more time with this person in this company than with your family, probably. I mean, unless you're working from home all the time, of course, which is a different caveat, but you're still going to be spending a hell of a lot of time with these people. So I think if you can get yourself into that mindset, it makes it a little bit easy for yourself. Okay. And I think in the interview, I think in the interview itself, I think when you're answering questions, I think, and again, this is potentially more for contract, but it probably does go for any IT jobs. You know, they're really looking to see what value you can add. I think if you're going for a developer job, you always want to be relating it to what you achieved and what you accomplished. Like, I think that's quite an important thing to remember. Again, kind of coming back to your CV and your achievements and your accolades. Like, I think you shouldn't be shy to shout about those things. I think you should be really, like, not being arrogant, and it is a fine line, and it does take a bit of practice to get there. But you know, you do want to try and be like as open about what you can bring to that organization, because
you're selling yourself, basically.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And I mean, you know, look, it takes some getting used to, and it is a difficult mindset for people to get into sometimes. So I think it doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. Like, I know I'm definitely in that camp. You know, I'm not particularly good at selling myself, but I think when you're in those situations, you do need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable at the end of the day. And I think, you know, they're going to be interviewing candidates with a similar background. You know, again, using, you know, IT developments as an example, you know, the CVs that they're interviewing, they've probably all got like a similar look and feel to them. They've all probably got like the similar duties and responsibilities. So it's really going to come down to like personality and how you sell what you've achieved. Like, they're going to be the two big things. So
I find I've probably got a little bit to add to this as well, which is I've done a lot of interviews from both sides, from interviewing people and then from being the interviewee, and I've plenty of practice with this. And I find that when I started out doing interviews, I used to think an interview is basically just a checklist where you go through, did you do this, this, and this? And often you'll find people are very nervous or rigid in interviews, and they'll just basically want to do a history check of. So, you know, it's almost like a sanity check your CV. But what I try to do in interviews now, and is instead of that, because effectively they're looking at you and asking the same questions that you're saying. Do I want to spend a lot of time with this person? So really, if you've got to the interview stage, they've already looked through your CV, they've looked through your references, you know, so you can kind of take a lot for granted. And it's very good to ask them questions and tease out, like, why are you hiring for this role? What is it that you need? And then fit your CV in the answers into what they need. So effectively go on a journey of, rather than like telling them 10 things that you've done, if only 3 or 4 are applicable to what they are looking for at the time. Do you know what I mean? So they don't care about all of that other stuff, really. Like you said, they're human. You know, they don't care that you can, you know, pat your head and pat your belly and put your head, like, they don't care you can do that, even though that might be a cool party trick. So you don't have to tell them every single thing that you've ever done. It's more like, try to tease out of them why this role is open, and then go on a journey with them in their mind in the interview of what you could add to the role. Oh, well, if you're trying to do this, I've in previous jobs, like in X, Y, and Z, and you just quote a few things from your CV, just get it really out really quickly. I approached this in this way, and I did it like this, and this was the result. Like, we had a successful project, or you know, and often you know the questions they're going to ask. So it's easy in an interview to turn an interview from a questions and answers session into a conversation. And if you can do that, they'll get the impression that, oh, we can go on this journey with this person. So you can preempt a lot of interview questions like, what did you do if you had a problem? Or how do you deal with problems? Or how do you deal with time delays? Or what? So you can build those into your original answers and kind of go on a little bit of telling a story about yourself and saying, oh, well, we had 3 months to do this, and we found kind of 2 months in that a lot of the planning around it we hadn't spent enough time planning. So we really had to sit down with the key stakeholders and make it clear to them that if they gave us another month, we'd be able to plan it properly and deliver better quality. And then have that kind of conversation with the stakeholder rather than just rushing a delivery.
Yeah, I think there's like there's two good points that you raised there. I mean, the first one, just coming back to like selling yourself, right? I think an interview is a sales exercise in a lot of ways, and I think for me, something that I always try and teach, the people who work for me, is that one of the main rules that I think is within sales is that it's always easier to sell when you have like a full picture of what's going on, and you have an idea of what the situation is, and you can get all that from the recruiter, from the company website, from the job spec. You can like you said, you can build those questions. Yeah, do your research and then really sell yourself into that role rather than selling yourself against a couple of bullet points like maybe have you done this, have you done that. So that's definitely like really important. I think the second point as well is make sure that you have those questions, make sure that you have open, good questions to ask. I think I've interviewed countless people to join my team at Lawrence Harvey. And I mean, I think it's one of the things that always makes a huge difference for me. And I'm sure it does for a lot of other managers is candidates genuinely asking questions at the end. Number one, to show interest, because you don't want to hire someone who doesn't give a crap, right? And number two, you can also use careful, intelligent questionings to display, to convey your experience and your subject matter expertise, right? If they're telling you about what their systems look like and what their projects look like, if you're asking like quite carefully constructed questions around that, then you're going to come across as someone who, looks at problems the right way and is quite consultative and can really help them out, basically.
Yeah.
So I think
there's one key question I would always recommend that you ask at the end. So most of the time,
how close to the nearest pub?
Yeah, well, most of the time the candidates will have a chance to answer questions, and yeah, obviously it's easier to build a rapport and relationship if you can go for a drink with them or whatever, right? But let's just say it's total remote work and all of that sort of interpersonal stuff is gone. The one key question I always ask, and I would recommend that everybody ask, is after the interviews they'll ask you, oh, do you have any questions? I would ask them, kind of put them on the spot a bit without being aggressive or forceful, put them on the spot and say, do you have, after talking to me and listening to me and seeing my CV, would you have any concerns that there's gaps in my CV of things that you're looking for? Do you know what I mean? Because this is the exact question that they're going to be asking themselves after the interview, right? Yeah. So sometimes they might have a concern of a gap in a CV where you can give them that little bit of extra information that maybe wasn't clear to them, because you don't know how they're looking at your CV or how they're perceiving your answers. So a gap that they think is this big might actually only be this big, and they'll see that, oh, he looks at things in a way that, oh, look, I want to reassure you about your concerns now before you go off and think about me as a candidate after the interview. You bring up, so you almost go to the post-interview stage with them in a tricky way where you're still in the room.
Yeah, so I think it's really important I think it is massively important to do that. I think coming back to like the first points that we made, I mean, not everyone's an amazing interviewer. In fact, I'd say, like, in my experience, I've only met a handful of people who are incredible interviewers who can get every bit of knowledge out of the candidate, or every bit of experience out of the candidate in one session, in a 45 or a 60-minute interview. There's only a handful of people that can do that. So you're giving the interviewer an opportunity to address any concerns that they might have, because they will probably have missed a couple of bits. I mean, I know I have. I've sort of sat down at the end of the interview and I forgot to ask this, or I forgot to ask that, or I didn't dig into this enough. And then, from the candidate's perspective, they may then have lost the opportunity to progress.